Thomas Ajayi was the kind of young man who drew attention wherever he went. His tall frame, confident stride, and sharp dress sense made people stop and stare. But it wasn't just his looks. Thomas came from one of the wealthiest families in Lagos. His mother, Mrs. Lauren Ajayi, was a household name in Nigeria. She had built a reputation as a woman of steel, taking over the Ajayi family empire after the untimely death of her husband, Mr. Isaac Ajayi, a few years back. She was known for her elegance, business acumen, and no-nonsense attitude. Thomas adored his mother, but lived in the shadow of her expectations. As her only child, she had poured all her energy into grooming him for greatness. "Thomas, you must always carry the Ajayi name with pride," she often said. While he respected his mother's wisdom, Thomas sometimes felt like a puppet in her grand plans. At university, Thomas tried to strike a balance between his mother's high expectations and his desires. It was during one of those days in the university library, trying to escape the weight of his family name, that he met Eunice. Eunice wasn't the kind of girl people easily forgot. Her long black hair seemed to catch the sunlight even indoors, and her warm brown eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that came not from wealth but from determination. That day, she was seated at a corner table, surrounded by a pile of books. She had been scribbling notes furiously when Thomas accidentally bumped into her, spilling her pens and papers onto the floor. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Thomas said, quickly crouching to help pick up the mess. "It's okay," Eunice replied, her voice calm and steady. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. They struck up a conversation that day, starting with small talk about their studies and ending with laughter over shared jokes. Thomas learned that Eunice was studying business administration and worked part-time to sponsor herself through school. She sent money back home to her parents, who lived in Dominion Village, a small town about 2 hours away from Lagos. Eunice's story intrigued Thomas. He had never met anyone so hardworking and selfless. She, in turn, found Thomas refreshingly down-to-earth despite his wealthy background. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened. They spent hours studying together, taking long walks around campus, and sharing their dreams for the future. For the first time in his life, Thomas felt truly happy. Eunice brought out a side of him that even he didn't know existed. One evening, as they walked by the campus lake, Thomas turned to Eunice and said, "I know we're young, and maybe this sounds crazy, but I can't imagine my life without you." Eunice smiled, her cheeks turning a soft shade of pink. "Thomas, you mean so much to me too. But what about your family? Your mother? Will she ever accept me?" Thomas took her hands in his. "Eunice, I don't care about what anyone thinks. You're the one I want to be with." After graduating, Thomas and Eunice decided to take their relationship to the next level. They planned a trip to Dominion Village for Thomas to meet Eunice's parents, Papa and Mama Eunice. Dominion Village was a world away from the bustling streets of Lagos. The narrow dirt roads, small thatched houses, and serene atmosphere starkly contrasted the luxury Thomas had grown up with. But he loved the simplicity of it all, especially when he saw how much it meant to Eunice. Papa and Mama Eunice welcomed Thomas warmly. They were humble people with kind hearts, and their love for their daughter was evident in every word they spoke. Thomas spent the day getting to know them, helping Papa Eunice with small chores around the house and enjoying Mama Eunice's delicious cooking. "Eunice is lucky to have you," Papa Eunice said that evening as they sat outside under the stars. "Take care of her, young man. She's all we have." Thomas nodded earnestly. "I promise, sir. I'll always take care of her." The trip to Dominion Village cemented Thomas's decision to marry Eunice. He couldn't wait to introduce her to his mother. Back in Lagos, Thomas brought Eunice to the grand Ajayi mansion. Mrs. Lauren Ajayi, dressed in her usual designer attire, greeted them with a warm smile. "Thomas, you didn't tell me you were bringing a guest," she said, her eyes scanning Eunice from head to toe. "This is Eunice, Mom. The girl I've been telling you about," Thomas said, beaming. Eunice extended her hand politely. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am." Mrs. Ajayi shook her hand, but didn't say much. Over dinner, She asked Eunice several questions: where she was from, what her parents did, and how she managed to afford university. Eunice answered honestly, her voice steady despite the underlying tension. At first, Mrs. Ajayi seemed impressed by Eunice's intelligence and poise. "You're quite the achiever," she said. However, her demeanor changes when she learns about Eunice's humble background and her parents in Dominion Village. The warmth in her eyes disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Thomas, may I speak with you privately?" she said after dinner. In her study, Mrs. Ajayi wasted no time. "Thomas, this girl is not suitable for you," she said bluntly. Thomas frowned. "Mom, how can you say that? You barely know her." "I know enough. She's from a poor background, Thomas. Do you think she can fit into our world? What will people say?" "Mom, I love her," Thomas said firmly. "And she loves me. Isn't that what matters?" Mrs. Ajayi's lips tightened. "You're young and foolish. Love isn't enough. Marriage is about compatibility, status, and respectability. This Eunice will bring nothing but shame to our family." But Thomas refused to listen. He returned to Eunice and proposed to her a week later, slipping a simple but elegant ring onto her finger. Eunice's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure about this, Thomas?" "Your mother." "I'm sure," Thomas said, cutting her off. "You're my future, Eunice. Nothing else matters." For a while, everything seemed perfect. They began planning their wedding, dreaming of a life together. But Thomas's defiance only fueled Mrs. Ajayi's determination to separate them. She wouldn't let her son ruin his life over a girl from Dominion Village. Thomas knew his mother could be stubborn, but he underestimated how far she would go to stop his relationship with Eunice. After he proposed, Mrs. Lauren Ajayi became a storm in his life. At first, her disapproval was subtle: pointed comments during meals, dismissive remarks about Eunice's background, but soon it escalated into outright hostility. One morning, as Thomas sat in the spacious dining room sipping coffee, his mother entered, her expression as sharp as her perfectly tailored suit. "Thomas, I've been thinking," she began, her voice deceptively calm. "This engagement of yours, it needs to end." Thomas set down his cup with a sigh. "Mom, we've had this conversation a dozen times. Eunice and I are getting married. Nothing you say will change that." Mrs. Ajayi's eyes narrowed. "You're my only son, Thomas. Everything your father and I built is for you. Do you think I'll stand by and watch you throw it all away for some girl with no pedigree?" "It's not about pedigree, Mom. It's about love. Eunice makes me happy. Isn't that what you want for me?" "What I want," she snapped, her voice rising, "is for you to think about your future. About our family's reputation. Do you know how many families in Lagos would kill to have their daughters marry into the Ajayi empire? And yet you choose hers?" Thomas stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "Enough, Mom. I've made my decision. If you can't support it, then stay out of it." But Mrs. Ajayi had no intention of staying out of it. Over the following weeks, she doubled down on her efforts to break them apart. She began dropping hints to Thomas about Linda, the daughter of her close friend, Mrs. Omateo. "Linda is such a lovely girl," she said one evening as they sat in the living room. "Smart, well-mannered, and from a respectable family. You should invite her for coffee sometime." Thomas ignored her, but she persisted. She even went as far as inviting Linda to the house under the pretense of a casual visit. Linda, with her polished demeanor and constant smile, seemed eager to please. But Thomas saw through her act. She was everything he didn't want in a partner: spoiled, superficial, and entirely self-centered. Meanwhile, Eunice began to notice the change in Thomas. Though he tried to shield her from his mother's disapproval, the strain was beginning to show. Their conversations grew shorter, their laughter less frequent. "Thomas, is everything okay?" Eunice asked one evening as they strolled through a park. He forced a smile. "Of course. Just busy with work and other things." Eunice stopped walking and turned to face him. "I know your mother doesn't approve of me. She hasn't from the start. If this is too much for you, I'll understand." "Don't say that," Thomas said, taking her hands. I love you, Eunice. We'll get through this. I promise. But promises weren't enough to shield them from the storm brewing around them. Mrs. Ajayi wasn't just meddling in Thomas's life. She began targeting Eunice directly. One afternoon, Eunice received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, the voice on the other end was cold and commanding. This is Lauren Ajayi. We need to talk. Eunice hesitated, her heart pounding. What is this about? Meet me at the Ivory Lounge tomorrow at 2 p.m. Don't be late. The next day, Eunice arrived at the upscale restaurant feeling nervous, but determined. She found Mrs. Ajayi seated at a corner table, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. Sit, Mrs. Ajayi said as Eunice approached. Eunice obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. You wanted to see me? I'll get straight to the point, Mrs. Ajayi said, her tone icy. You're not good enough for my son. You come from nothing. You have nothing to offer him except a pretty face, and that won't last. Eunice's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure. With all due respect, ma'am, Thomas loves me. And I love him. Isn't that enough? Love. Mrs. Ajayi scoffed. Love doesn't pay the bills, or build empires. You think you can survive in our world? Do you know the kind of pressure that comes with being an Ajayi? You'll crumble under it, and when you do, you'll drag my son down with you. Eunice met her gaze, her voice steady. I may not come from wealth, but I'm not weak. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'll continue to work hard, for myself and for Thomas. For a moment, Mrs. Ajayi seemed taken aback by Eunice's resolve. But she quickly recovered, leaning in with a smirk. You're ambitious. I'll give you that. But ambition won't change the fact that you'll never be one of us. Eunice left the meeting feeling shaken but determined not to let Mrs. Ajayi's words get to her. However, the encounter marked a turning point. The pressure on Thomas grew unbearable as his mother's disapproval seeped into every corner of his life. Thomas, you have to choose, Mrs. Ajayi said one evening. It's me or her. And if you choose her, don't expect a single naira from this family. Faced with the prospect of losing everything he had ever known, Thomas wavered. He loved Eunice deeply, but his mother's threats loomed large over him. One fateful evening, after days of sleepless nights and endless arguments, Thomas met Eunice in the same park where they had shared so many happy moments. Thomas, what's wrong? Eunice asked, her eyes searching his. He looked away, his voice breaking. I can't do this anymore, Eunice. I'm sorry. Her heart sank. What are you saying? My mother, she's right. We come from different worlds. This won't work. Eunice felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. Thomas, don't let her control you. We can make this work together. But Thomas shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Eunice. I'm so sorry. As he walked away, Eunice stood frozen, her heart shattered into a million pieces. That night, Thomas cried himself to sleep, haunted by the look of betrayal on Eunice's face. But deep down, he knew he had made a mistake, one that would cost him dearly. Eunice sat in her small apartment, staring at the engagement ring Thomas had given her. The shine of the diamond felt mocking now, a cruel reminder of a love she thought would last forever. Tears streamed down her face as she replayed his words over and over in her mind. I'm sorry, Eunice. I'm so sorry. Days turned into weeks, and the pain refused to fade. Her world felt like it had crumbled around her. Friends tried to console her, but nothing seemed to help. The vibrant, determined Eunice was now a shadow of herself. I thought he was different, she confided to her closest friend, Grace. I thought he loved me enough to fight for us. Grace hugged her tightly. You'll get through this, Eunice. You're stronger than this heartbreak. But Eunice wasn't sure she believed that. Meanwhile, Thomas's life wasn't any easier. Though he had broken things off with Eunice, the decision didn't bring him the peace his mother had promised. Instead, it left a gaping hole in his heart. He threw himself into work, attending meetings and events, but nothing could distract him from the emptiness he felt. At home, Mrs. Lauren Ajayi seemed pleased. I knew you'd come to your senses, Thomas, she said one evening over dinner. Now, It's time to focus on your future. Linda is the perfect match for you.
Thomas didn't respond.
The idea of marrying Linda made his stomach churn, but he couldn't bring himself to argue with his mother again. Eunice, on the other hand, was determined not to let the heartbreak define her. She decided to pour all her energy into her career. She applied for jobs in Lagos and soon landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. The long hours and demanding workload kept her mind busy, leaving little room for thoughts of Thomas. Her hard work paid off. Within months, Eunice had earned a reputation as one of the firm's brightest talents. She took on challenging projects, brought in high-profile clients, and quickly rose through the ranks. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation, her boss called her into his office. "Eunice, I'm impressed with your work," he said. "You've brought in more clients in 6 months than most people do in 2 years. I'd like to promote you to senior account manager." Eunice's eyes widened. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As she left the office that day, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of happiness. Thomas, however, was spiraling. His mother's insistence that he marry Linda grew louder by the day. Eventually, after months of relentless pressure, Thomas gave in. The wedding was a grand affair, with all the glitz and glamour befitting an Ajayi family event. The who's who of Lagos society attended, and the media buzzed with stories about the union of two powerful families. But beneath the surface, Thomas was miserable. As he stood at the altar, watching Linda walk toward him in her designer gown, he felt like a prisoner trapped in a life he hadn't chosen. The months that followed the wedding were a nightmare. Linda was nothing like the ideal partner his mother had painted her to be. She was selfish, rude, and completely uninterested in building a life together. One evening, after a particularly heated argument, Linda sneered at Thomas. "You're such a bore. Do you think I married you for love? I married you for your name, your money. Don't pretend you didn't know that." Thomas was stunned. He had sacrificed the love of his life for this? Back in her world, Eunice's success continued to grow. She bought her parents a new house in Dominion Village and sent them money regularly. They were proud of her, though they often worried about her being alone. "Eunice, you should find someone," her mother said one day during a phone call. "You deserve to be happy." "I'm fine, Mama," Eunice replied. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she was ready to open her heart again. That changed when she met Depo. He was a successful entrepreneur who had hired Eunice's firm to manage his company's marketing campaign. Their professional relationship quickly blossomed into friendship, and soon, something more. Depo was kind, patient, and supportive, everything Thomas had been and more. He didn't shy away from Eunice's past, but instead admired her strength and resilience. One evening, as they strolled through a quiet park, Depo stopped and turned to Eunice. "I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I see a future with you, Eunice." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Depo, you've been so good to me. I'm scared, but I want to try." As their relationship deepened, Depo introduced Eunice to his family, who welcomed her with open arms. For the first time in years, Eunice felt truly loved and accepted. Meanwhile, Thomas's life continued to unravel. Linda's reckless spending and volatile temper began to affect his family's business. She threw lavish parties, ignored their financial limits, and treated Thomas with open contempt. One night, after a particularly brutal fight, Linda did the unthinkable. She hired thugs to rough Thomas up, hoping to scare him into submission. When Mrs. Ajayi learned what had happened, she was furious. "This is your fault, Thomas," she yelled. "You should have handled her better." Thomas, bruised and battered, stared at his mother with cold eyes.
"No, Mom.
"This is your fault. You forced me to marry her. You destroyed my life." For the first time, Mrs. Ajayi was at a loss for words. She had always believed she knew what was best for her son, but now she couldn't deny the damage her decisions had caused. Thomas sat in the dim light of his study, nursing a glass of whiskey. The room was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner. His bruised face was a painful reminder of the night Linda's thugs had attacked him. His marriage was a disaster, his family business was teetering on the brink of collapse, and the love of his life was gone. The door creaked open, and his mother entered, her face drawn with worry. "Thomas," she began softly, "I didn't mean for things to get this bad." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Didn't you? You were so focused on your reputation, on controlling my life, that you never stopped to think about what I wanted." Mrs. Ajayi sank into a chair across from him. "I thought I was protecting you. Linda came from a good family. I thought she would be suitable." "Suitable?" Thomas spat. "She's destroyed everything. And you let her." For the first time, his mother looked genuinely remorseful. "I was wrong, Thomas.
I see that now.
But we can fix this. Together." Thomas shook his head. "It's too late for that, Mom." While Thomas's life spiraled further out of control, Eunice's life was flourishing. Her relationship with Dapo grew stronger by the day, and her career continued to soar. One evening, Dapo surprised her with a romantic dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Lagos skyline. As the evening wore on, Dapo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Eunice," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you're the most incredible woman I've ever met. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Eunice's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Dapo. Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eunice felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had finally found the happiness she deserved. Thomas, meanwhile, was sinking deeper into despair. Linda's actions had left the Ajayi family business on the verge of bankruptcy. Suppliers were pulling out, investors were losing confidence, and the media was filled with stories about Linda's wild parties and reckless spending. One afternoon, as Thomas sat in his office staring blankly at his desk, his mother burst in. "Thomas, we need to talk," she said urgently. "What now, Mom?" he muttered, not even looking up.
"It's Eunice," she said.
"She's engaged." Thomas's head snapped up.
"What?"
"I found out this morning. She's getting married to some businessman." Thomas felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. Eunice was moving on. She was happy. And he was stuck in a life he hated. "She deserves it," he said finally, his voice hollow. "She deserves to be happy." His mother, however, was not ready to let go. "Thomas, you have to fix this. You have to get her back." Thomas laughed bitterly. "And how do you suggest I do that, Mom?" "Show up and beg her to leave the man who treats her right for the idiot who broke her heart." But his mother was determined. "I'll go to her myself. I'll explain everything. I'll beg if I have to." Thomas shook his head. "It's too late, Mom. Let her be happy." But Mrs. Ajayi didn't listen. The next day, she showed up unannounced at Eunice's office. Eunice was surprised to see her. "Mrs. Ajayi, what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," the older woman said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I was wrong about you, Eunice.
I see that now.
And I'm begging you to give Thomas another chance." Eunice stared at her in disbelief. "Another chance? After everything he put me through?" "I know my son hurt you," Mrs. Ajayi said, tears streaming down her face. "But he's miserable without you. Linda was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, Eunice." Eunice shook her head.
"I've moved on, ma'am.
"I'm engaged to a man who loves and respects me. A man who didn't need his mother's approval to choose me." Mrs. Ajayi's shoulders slumped. "Please, Eunice." For Thomas. But Eunice was resolute. "It's too late. Goodbye, Mrs. Ajayi." When Mrs. Ajayi returned home, Thomas was waiting for her. "Well?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "She's moved on," his mother said quietly. "She's happy." Thomas nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Then I'll have to live with the choices I made." For the first time in his life, Thomas understood the weight of his decisions. And for the first time, his mother realized that her interference had done more harm than good. Thomas Ajayi sat in his living room, staring at the pile of legal documents on the coffee table. The papers were a painful reminder of the wreckage his life had become. His marriage to Linda was over, officially annulled. The divorce was ugly, but it was a small relief compared to the chaos she had left behind. The Ajayi family business was barely holding on, with debts piling up and investors jumping ship. Thomas worked tirelessly to salvage what he could, but his heart wasn't in it. He had lost the one person who had ever made him truly happy, and no amount of business success could fill that void. One evening, as he walked through the empty halls of his childhood home, he found his mother sitting in the family library. She looked older, more fragile, as though the weight of her mistakes had finally caught up with her. "Thomas," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about what I did to you. To us." He sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "I let my pride and my obsession with appearances ruin everything," she continued. "I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was push you into a life you didn't want. I'm sorry, son. I truly am." Thomas looked at her for a long moment before replying. "I appreciate the apology, Mom. But it doesn't change what's happened. We've both made choices we have to live with." Meanwhile, Eunice's life was blooming like a flower in spring. Her engagement to Depo was the talk of her circle, and she was excitedly planning her wedding. Her parents were overjoyed, and Depo's family had embraced her as one of their own. One afternoon, as Eunice and Depo strolled through a bustling Lagos market, they came across a vendor selling handmade jewelry. Eunice's eyes lit up as she admired the intricate designs. "This one," she said, pointing to a delicate gold bracelet. Depo smiled and paid for it, clasping it around her wrist. "It looks beautiful on you," he said. Eunice beamed. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. But her past wasn't entirely behind her. One day, as she was leaving her office, she saw a familiar figure waiting outside. "Thomas," she said, surprised. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep into his pockets.
"Hi, Eunice."
"I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to talk to you." She hesitated for a moment before nodding.
"Okay,
let's talk." They found a quiet cafe nearby and sat across from each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I heard about your engagement," Thomas said finally. "Congratulations. He seems like a good man." "Thank you," Eunice said, her voice cautious. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Thomas continued. "For everything. For hurting you. For not standing up to my mother. For letting you go. It's the biggest regret of my life." Eunice looked at him, her expression softening. "Thomas, I appreciate the apology. I do. But we can't change the past."
I've moved on, and I'm happy now."
Thomas nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know. And I'm glad. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Eunice." They parted ways that evening, with Thomas feeling a strange mix of closure and heartache. Back at home, Thomas threw himself into rebuilding his life. He started working with his mother to restructure the family business, bringing in new partners and cutting unnecessary expenses. Slowly but surely, the Ajayi empire began to stabilize. Through the process, Thomas and his mother grew closer. Their shared struggles forced them to confront their flaws and work together to build something stronger. One day, as they reviewed a new business proposal, Mrs. Ajayi looked at her son and smiled. "You're going to be okay, Thomas. I can see it now." Thomas smiled back. "Thanks, Mom." Months later, Eunice and Depo's wedding was a grand celebration filled with love and joy. As Eunice walked down the aisle, her heart swelled with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Among the guests, unnoticed by most, was Thomas. He had come quietly, sitting in the back row to witness the moment Eunice found her happiness. As the ceremony concluded and the newlyweds shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Thomas stood and slipped out of the church. Outside, he took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. "I'll be okay," he whispered to himself. And he would be.